And now that gets us to the present. The truck hasn't changed much in the past about year because I have to go to school about 5 hours away from here. And so the fact that I have to make that commute several times a year made it so that I really couldn't do any major upgrades to my truck. The paint's held up pretty good. It's gotten some chips and some scratches in it. I had a small collision that threw some glass onto the paint over on the fender here that chipped it up a little bit. And it just generally gets used as a work truck, so the paint is not perfect. But other than that, and some minor little improvements here and there, not much has changed on it from about a year ago. It's a good daily driving truck, and that's the way I need it to be for being at school. But now is where I start looking towards the future plans of the truck. So one of the first things is that this has got the Dana 50 independent front suspension, the twin traction beam. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's this component underneath here, where instead of a solid front axle that connects this tire to this tire, it's actually got two separate pieces. You can kind of see up in here, that's where the differential is for the front axle, and it's got a shaft that goes across with a U-joint that goes to the other tire. This gives it a pivot point here and behind the carrier that you can't really see. This allows it to have independent front suspension. The problem is it's not a very strong setup, and this truck also has some alignment issues, not too severe but enough that the alignment shop doesn't really want to work on it just because of how rusted it is. So the first upgrade is I plan to put a solid front axle in this truck. The front axle, and indeed most of the suspension components, came out of a 97 F250, and really the only difference between a F250 and an F350 is in the rear the amount of springs that are in the spring pack, and in the front the solid Dana 60 front axle, as opposed to the 250 that has this setup, the Dana 50 twin traction beam. So the main reason that we're going to be putting that in there is what's going to go under the hood. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, I had the 302 and the automatic that was from my old blue truck, and that is indeed what's still in here. It's had some minor upgrades and some maintenance things like putting a new battery in it and things like that just to keep it a good daily drivable vehicle, but for the most part it's remained unchanged. This was not the original intent when I first put this truck together. It just is what ended up working with the way life ended up, quite frankly, happening. So the plan is, though, this engine, the transmission, the transfer case are all going to come out, and we're going to be going diesel. So the engine that's going to be going in here is not a Power Stroke. It's not a 7.3 IDI. It's actually going to be an International DT360. It's 5.9 liters. It's the same displacement as a 12 or a 24 valve Cummins, but it's a wet sleeve engine, 6-cylinder, inline 6, that International made between the late 80s through the early 90s. And it should fit in here pretty good. There's a couple of guys that have already done this on YouTube that I'm kind of using for some inspiration. A lot of people, I've been getting some comments about people wanting to see a 7.3 in this truck and see all sorts of other things like that, and unfortunately time and money are going to prevent that most likely from happening. But to go behind that engine, since the DT360 was never offered in one of these pickups, they were only offered in medium duty trucks, the transmission that's going to go behind it is most likely going to be either a medium duty 6-speed transmission, hopefully with an overdrive, or it's going to have an automatic similar to the setup that it has now, but indeed the automatic would be something like an Allison 2000 transmission or something of that nature that can actually handle the horsepower and torque of the DT. Obviously, along with that, I have to convert the truck. Since it's currently a gas system, I have to convert the fuel system over to diesel. And indeed, I actually have a parts truck down at our farm that is going to be the donor vehicle of a lot of components. The transfer case, because I want to keep the truck a four-wheel drive, is going to be a divorced NP205. Basically, the transfer case, for those of you that don't know what a divorced transfer case means, actually I have an example here. A transfer case like what would have been on these trucks is what's called a mated design. for basically the transmission and the transfer case are one unit. They're connected together. For a divorce transfer case, the transfer case itself sits back from the transmission itself, and there's a short little shaft that connects the two. Basically, this just allows me to run a medium-duty truck transmission without the worry of trying to adapt or mate a Ford transfer case to it and just the extra expense associated with it. Other than that, that's basically the plan for the future, is going to be the front axle. And that's the other reason behind that heavier front axle, is that the DT weighs considerably more than obviously the gas motor or even a 7.3 Power Stroke. So I need something that's going to be able to actually handle the extra weight of that motor and transmission. I'm not the greatest about posting to YouTube, but if you go follow me on Instagram at Tractor Guys Garage, I post more regularly updates and pictures of things as they're going along. And if you want to go see more content that's actually more in time with the way things are going, you can go ahead and follow me there, and you'll get to see more current updates. Some of the challenges that are going to be is obviously with the gas motor and the way it's set up, the fuel lines, the cooling system, all of that's going to have to come out and be reworked. The mounting system for one of these diesels is also much different than a gas. The gas motor mounts essentially on this front cross member right here, and it's got a mount on this side and then a mount on the other side. The DTs actually have a front mount that would essentially land basically right about here on a cross member on the frame, and then they have a rear mount that's going to wind up basically where that wiring goes down past the frame. My goal for this is that the engine, it's not going to have mechanical fans, it'll be an electric fan setup, so the engine can sit farther forward. I don't want to have to lift the body at all unless I absolutely have to, and I want to try to keep it stock looking and relatively stock proportion in terms of the cab height and things like that, just because I do daily drive this truck a lot and I don't want to have it get super high up to where it becomes unwieldy. Other than that, that's about where I'm at right now. Next steps are going to be trying to find and source a Dana 60 and go through, see what it needs to get it ready to be put in this truck. I'll be sure to put up a video of anything that I come across in terms of finding and installing the axle. After that, I get to start looking into finding an engine and a transmission and transfer case and going through all of the fun stuff associated with getting that put in the truck. This isn't going to be a quick process. I'm still a college student and I have a college student's budget, so the time that this might take to get done will be a little bit while. I just ask for your patience and that I will be slowly making progress. And like I say, on Instagram is where I'll post a little bit shorter updates as I get them. The other common goal is that this truck has to still be my daily driver, at least from as of now. So I can't do anything that I can't have this truck still able to drive within a week or so. But yeah, it's holding up pretty good for what it is. It's a good daily driving workhorse truck, which is kind of what the whole idea was behind it. I didn't want something that was going to be too fancy or too elaborate that I was afraid to get muddy and get dirty if I needed to go out and get in some mud or whatever. Yeah, it's not a super pretty truck, but it serves me good for my purposes. So if you all have any comments or questions, just leave them down in the comments and I'll do the best that I can to answer them. And yeah, that's an update on Tractor Guys Garage.